You know exactly what you should be doing with your money. Save more, spend less on impulse purchases, stick to the budget. And you still do not do it consistently. Not because you lack information, but because your brain is running ancient decision-making software that was never designed for credit cards, subscription services, or 30-year retirement planning. The real problem is not a knowledge gap. It is that several well-documented cognitive biases are actively working against your stated financial goals every single day, and almost nobody is taught the specific techniques that actually counteract them. Here are the science-backed hacks that work with your brain's wiring instead of fighting a losing battle against it. Welcome to Daily Money Mindset. Let us start with present bias, sometimes called hyperbolic discounting, because it is probably the single most expensive bias in personal finance. Present bias describes the brain's tendency to dramatically overvalue immediate rewards relative to future ones, even when the future reward is objectively larger. This is why save for retirement loses to buy this now in the moment, even when you genuinely know the math favors saving. The counteraction technique that actually works against present bias is called temporal bundling, and it means deliberately linking a future-oriented action to an immediate reward or immediate emotional payoff. Instead of relying on willpower to choose the abstract future benefit of retirement savings over an immediate purchase, structure automatic contributions so the decision happens once, automatically, removing the recurring moment where present bias gets a chance to win. We have covered this in detail in a previous video on automation, but the core principle connects directly back to this specific bias. Automation does not require you to win the present versus future battle repeatedly because it removes the battle entirely. The second bias is loss aversion, which describes the well-documented finding that losing money feels roughly twice as painful as gaining the equivalent amount feels good. This asymmetry explains a huge amount of seemingly irrational financial behavior, including holding on to losing investments far longer than the data justifies, because selling would mean realizing and confirming the loss, and avoiding necessary financial conversations or account check-ins, because the anxiety of potentially seeing a loss outweighs the value of the information. The counteraction technique here is reframing losses as the cost of information rather than as failures. When an investment underperforms, the useful question is not, how do I avoid feeling this loss? But, what does this tell me? And does the original reasoning for holding this investment still apply? Separating the emotional sting of loss aversion from the actual decision-making process is difficult to do purely through willpower, which is why many sophisticated investors use predetermined rules, like rebalancing thresholds we have covered before, that remove the in-the-moment emotional decision entirely and replace it with a rule decided in advance, during a calm moment, before the loss aversion bias has a chance to distort judgment. The third bias is mental accounting, which describes the tendency to treat money differently depending on its source or intended category, even though money is fungible and a dollar is a dollar regardless of where it came from. This shows up as treating a tax refund or bonus as found money, to be spent more freely than regular income, or maintaining a savings account earning minimal interest while carrying credit card debt at a much higher rate, because the brain mentally separates my savings from my debt, rather than recognizing the simple math that paying down the higher rate debt with the savings produces a guaranteed positive return. The counteraction technique for mental accounting is what behavioral economists call account consolidation thinking, deliberately running the math as if all your money sits in a single pool, regardless of which account it currently lives in. Before treating a windfall differently than regular income, or before keeping low-yield savings while carrying high-interest debt, ask explicitly whether you would make the same decision if this were simply framed as all my money, rather than money assigned to a specific mental category. This single reframe routinely changes the decision, because the underlying math was always clear. It was the mental categorization that was obscuring it. The fourth bias is the anchoring effect, which describes how an initial piece of information disproportionately influences subsequent judgments, even when that initial information is arbitrary or irrelevant. This shows up constantly in negotiation and pricing. A original price listed next to a sale price anchors your sense of value even when the original price was inflated specifically to make the sale price look better. And a starting salary offer anchors the entire negotiation conversation that follows it. The counteraction technique for anchoring is establishing your own reference point before encountering an external one. Before negotiating a salary, research market rates independently and decide your target number before hearing any offer. Before evaluating whether a sale price represents real value, research the actual typical price across multiple sources rather than trusting the original price presented alongside the discount. The principle is simple. Whoever sets the first number in any financial interaction has significant influence over the entire conversation. So make sure that first number, whenever possible, is one you set based on independent research rather than one set by whoever benefits from anchoring you somewhere specific. The fifth bias worth understanding is the sunk cost fallacy, which describes the tendency to continue investing in a decision because of what you have already invested, rather than evaluating the decision based on its current and future merits alone. This shows up in personal finance through holding on to a bad investment because you have already lost money on it, continuing to pay for an underused membership because you already paid the initiation fee, or staying in a costly financial product because switching feels like admitting the original choice was wrong. The counteraction technique is a specific reframing question. If you were encountering this exact decision today, with no history attached, knowing only the current facts, would you choose it? If the answer is no, the sunk cost is genuinely sunk, regardless of how much has already been invested, and continuing simply compounds the original mistake rather than correcting it. Let us bring these together into a practical framework, because understanding the biases matters less than having concrete counteraction techniques ready when they show up. Present bias gets countered through automation that removes the recurring decision point. Loss aversion gets countered through predetermined rules decided in calm moments rather than emotional ones. Mental accounting gets countered through treating all your money as one pool when evaluating trade-offs. Anchoring gets countered through establishing your own independent reference point before encountering an external one. Sunk cost gets countered through evaluating decisions based only on current and future facts, ignoring what has already been spent or invested. None of these techniques require extraordinary willpower or constant vigilance, which is the point. They work by changing the structure of the decision rather than relying on you to consciously out-reason a deeply wired cognitive bias every single time it shows up, which is a battle that even highly disciplined people lose with predictable regularity. If this helped you recognize a pattern in your own financial decisions, hit the like button and subscribe to Daily Money Mindset for 3 videos every week covering the psychology and strategy of money. Drop a comment below and tell us which of these 5 biases you recognize most in your own behavior. We read every comment. Resources on behavioral finance research are linked in the description below.